Hey everybody, this is Chris Thompson and welcome to session number 28 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. He wears black socks exclusively. He's crossed the ocean twice by ship. And being a northerner, he uses a full spectrum light every day for 6 full months of the year. Welcome, Dr. Mike.
Thank you, Christopher. We are here where we belong, broadcasting to the very planet and beyond from Toronto, Canada, the most multicultural, the most kind, open, and generous city on the planet of 3 million people plus, just steps away from the prestigious University of Toronto, where we teach our Architecture of Hypnosis course. Next one coming up in April. More courses coming up prior to that, as we will let you know. Notice the speed at which I'm speaking, which is only to get as much stuff in as possible before someone brings me off the microphone and we have to then move on to Chris.
All right, so we have with us a guest that we have promised a couple of times. I promised it with you on episode number 26. I told you that the next episode would be the great Hugh Comferford, Canada's foremost NLP trainer. And then on episode 27, I had to correct myself and say that I was the one who screwed up and that it wasn't really him canceling on us and postponing our schedule and that it was my mistake. And now here we are on episode number 28, because this is the one where Hugh Comferford is here and he's going to talk to us. That's right. Talk to us about the state of NLP in the world. So, Hugh, welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's lovely to be here in the epicenter of, well, let's call it NLP today.
Yes, we will.
World NLP.
World NLP, where all things are always good as long as you have the resources to make it so.
Nice.
That's right.
Excellent.
And you can make those resources anytime you bloody
Okay,
well
off
want
the
to.
hypnotic language, Chris. What I find particularly interesting about having Hugh here is this is actually one of our more serious podcasts, although one would never know that based on the fact that this is about our 4th attempt at the introduction and moving into it. We seem to be moving forward, but it is a genuine question of mine. What the heck has happened to Neuro Linguistic Programming worldwide?
That's an excellent question. I think that we would have to go back to the very beginning of NLP, where Richard Bandler and John Grinder and Frank Puselic, who is the unknown of the NLP world, one of the originators, they were not interested in proving anything. They were not interested in doing anything but being proven right themselves. They weren't interested in empirical proof. They were interested in helping people change. And what happened was they didn't organize the field well enough. And the net effect is NLP is, as Dr. Richard Bandler said recently, to define NLP, he said, NLP is whatever the beep I say it is.
Right, so now we have no empirical gauge to judge it by. And the funny thing is, I mean, NLP, if you're not familiar with it, we're basically talking about the psychology of personal excellence, because the very first people who were modeled were therapists like the great Milton Erickson, Virginia Satir, and Fritz Perls. And they discovered, Bandler and Grinder and some others discovered the difference that makes the difference and what made these amazing therapists amazing. And that's how it all began, right?
Essentially what they did was, if you take Ericksonian hypnosis, you take Satyrian family therapy, and you take Gestalt therapy, what's in the center is what is NLP. And it's really, essentially, it's the study of what makes brilliant people brilliant, extracting that, placing it into a model, and then having someone lead someone through that model and having them experience the same sort of outcomes. There are 3 basic definitions of NLP. First definition is the true definition. It's modeling. So it's, I go out there, I find somebody who is spectacular at business. Every business book is an NLP book. It's a modeling book. What I do is I create a process and I say, hey, here's the patented process to make somebody off the street into a bazillionaire. And they do it and they can get very good at it. Second definition of NLP is the process itself. So it is the dock on the bay. It is the 6-step reframe. It is the characterological adjectives. All of the processes are what people believe is truly NLP. The third definition of NLP is taking the tools of NLP, the brilliant communication pieces, and then distorting them to create a one-up, one-down context where I can now control people. I can manipulate people. Oh, sorry, I didn't say that. So it's basically creating a context where NLP is used in sales, NLP is used to convince, NLP is used not in a generative context, in a sometimes a degenerative context. So those are my three main definitions of NLP, and NLP has kind of gotten off the rails when it's really lost sight of what it was there to do in the beginning. You know, the first NLP practitioner sessions created by David Gordon, who I've had a long chat with, and he apologized to the NLP community because they said, I was so mean. I made people do really difficult things, but they became brilliant at NLP. 30 days long.
And this is Gordon who wrote the Metaphor book?
Yep, that's
okay.
David Gordon. So new iterations of NLP, you know that there's somebody in Toronto where you can come and you can take a weekend NLP course, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, $99, and you are an NLP practitioner.
Well, I'm hoping they offer a Doctor of Medicine course as well. I think that would be equally good to be able to pick up those skills in a weekend.
No, it's airline pilots, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I have a question for you, Hugh. It sounds like the way you described NLP with those different definitions, it sounds to me like everything that we already do is NLP. It's just that most people who don't actually do it consciously, don't know the processes, they just model things badly, or they let their unconscious processes run things and they haven't fixed their unconscious processes. And if you use NLP, I assume most of the time when you go to use it, you use it consciously until you become unconsciously competent in it.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Everything, I mean, this is not a science. This is a modeling exercise for the most part, right?
And it's a set of tools to create excellence.
A model about models.
Essentially. Nicely put.
Thank you.
So, thank you. So, initially NLP was really around Richard Bandler and Frank Puslik literally pretending that they were Fritz Perls, and John Grinder noticing what they were doing and saying, hey, you guys are better than Fritz Perls because you don't share his limitations and understandings. Because Fritz Perls said the only people who can injure children are their parents. Bandler and Puslik didn't recognize that model, so they recognized that peers could injure children, and so they would have trauma, and so they would be able to change through exercise. So by modeling the behaviors of Fritz Perls, by modeling the behaviors of Bandler and Puslik and really augmenting that into a significant communication model, they were able to really isolate those things, as you said, the subtle things that make a difference, to help people transform behaviorally. So NLP really started out as a set of communication tools, and then it morphed into a set of behavioral change tools, also known as therapy.
So could we say that the communication tools, like the meta model, using language to clarify language, then became the doorway to discovering a lot of these other patterns?
Yes, absolutely, and behavioral change patterns. So, I mean, here, I worked with a client a couple of years ago. She was completely phobic of doctors and hospitals. She was told that she had a fatal heart condition, and if she did not get treatment, she was dead. She was 30 years old. She told me that she had had minor heart attacks in the kitchen at home with her children in the house, and she did not seek medical treatment, came to me afraid of the voodoo I was going to do because her friend brought me, and I sat down beside her and we hung out for 45 minutes. I got into rapport, which is essentially basic communication skills at an unconscious level to get her calm and comfortable. I did 45 minutes worth of NLP intervention or NLP process to help people disconnect fear from their lives. And 4 months later, she had open heart surgery with her being awake and survived it, sent me a lovely email, and she's done. Does that mean I'm a therapist? Does that mean I'm a psychiatrist? Does that mean I'm a hypnotist? Does that mean I'm a voodoo doctor? No, what it means is I've used some interesting tools from the body of knowledge that is NLP to help somebody transform their life in a way that actually saved their life.
Now, that's wonderful, Hugh, because it's a measurable result. And everything you're saying agrees with what I call the Mandel Model of therapy, which is our clients are our clients because, as Erickson said, they're out of rapport with their own unconscious mind. And the Mandel Model basically states you assume the hallucination that your client is trapped in a labyrinth. Now, a labyrinth has false turns, dead ends, and repeated patterns. It's dark, it's scary, there's monsters there sometimes. And as much as we would love to enter the labyrinth and drag them out and kill the Minotaur for them, we can't. But we can, through communication skills and so on, illuminate the pathway that they then walk and become well on their own.
I think that it would be really useful at this point to talk a little bit more about the initial beginnings of NLP, the meta model, the conversational techniques that were used. Let's go back in time and Hugh, maybe imagine that you were back in that conversation with this person who needed open heart surgery. What are some of the interesting questions that you're asking her that get her to look at her model of the world differently? Because it's all about modeling, right? So you're helping her create a new model of the world. And what kind of questions might you have asked her?
Map.
Yeah. You know what? It's funny because I trained a couple of dozen psychiatrists a few weeks ago. And what I said was, every one of your clients is right. They're just not correct. And I made that distinction because these people are always arguing with people. No, you're not Jesus Christ. No, you're not Wayne Gretzky. Why fight? So what I always ask is, teach me how to be you. How do you do that? So in NLP, everything goes from this ephemeral notion about how do you do that? How do you do frightened in school? How do you do, what is the step-by-step process that you engage at an unconscious level that takes you from being a totally rational, well-adjusted human person into freaking out when you have to go out on a date, or freaking out if you have to speak to people more than 5? And so what I do is I break that down by asking them very specific questions about their behavioral pattern, and then what I do, in the nicest way that I possibly can, is I mess it up. I actually change their behavioral pattern, add a step, delete a step. If you know anything about computer programming, if you add one small step into a program, it becomes a different program. If you take away one small step from a program, it's no longer the same program. It's now something entirely different.
Yeah, and if you put a bug in it, i.e. a pattern interrupt, the program just won't execute anymore, will it?
Well, you know what? To your point, thank you for that, because there's this. What I love is that neuroscience is coming online to prove the field of NLP in really amazing ways. Everyone who knows a little bit about NLP knows about the pattern interrupt. Pattern interrupt is Tony Robbins yelling at some poor guy who wants to have a cigarette and forcing him to have 5, 6, 7 cigarettes. So Tony interrupts the pattern by freaking the person out. From a neurological perspective, what's actually happening in neuroscientific terms, well proven now in science, that when you interrupt somebody's pattern, so if they're saying the same story over and over again, you interrupt them by having them change the subject in their heads. Hey, look at that. That's a really funny looking bus. I haven't seen a bus like that. Completely change the subject. What that does is it neurologically opens up an 18-hour window that if you introduce something that's kind of similar and kind of interesting into their unconscious minds, it'll actually overwrite their pattern of brokenness. So now they can go into a situation, they're no longer phobic, they're no longer frightened, they're no longer whatever it is, just by doing a pattern interrupt and then a reinstallation.
Now, this is really interesting, Hugh, because this dovetails nicely into the neuroscience that I've been talking for a few months now. I'm expecting every hypnotist in the world to pick up on this eventually and make it mainstream. But what we're creating here with the pattern interrupt is a PGO spike. And the neuroscience is absolutely sound. We're causing a pulse to go from the pons to the geniculate body up into the occiput, which is a superhighway. It's super fast. It temporarily shuts down the prefrontal cortex, which is much slower, and it opens a window where something else can be offered. And you nailed it, because you said, if it's something with novelty, something that's new and interesting, that's what the brain will gravitate to. And we're then setting up in the neural pathways. You're creating new plasticity, neuroplasticity, new pathways that can be run instead. And of course, the more the person runs the new pathways, the more the old ones will atrophy and just eventually cease to exist.
And the term, by the way, in neuroscience is called reconsolidation. So it's reconsolidating a memory by leveraging the neuroplasticity. So I'm actually rewriting the program.
It makes a lot of sense. So this is essentially pattern interrupts, the meta model, asking good questions. These are all vocal tools that we use, right? Now, how did NLP then evolve in terms of not just talking to somebody and building rapport, which you need, because you can ask them some of these questions about how do you get scared? You can do it in a really annoying way and piss them off and break rapport, and you won't have any therapeutic effects on them. Or you can build rapport. You can ask the questions with genuine interest, and you can help them change the way they see things. You can use pattern interrupts. You can reprogram their mind. How did we then evolve NLP to involve things like breathing and moving and state shifting by doing these things?
It's an awesome question. And really, NLP was all about observation. Most people, if you know a little bit about NLP, you know about eye accessing cues, right? Eye accessing cues are, if I look up and to my left, I'm seeing pictures from my memory. If I look up and to my right, I'm actually creating images that I've never seen before. The middle level is eyes left is auditory memory, eyes right is auditory creation. If I look down to my right, it's feelings, and if I look down to my left, it's self-talk, okay? As I said back to my friends, the psychiatrists, what I did was I had them all think about something really, really sad, a true thing in their lives that they felt very sad about. And I had them put their hands up in the air, And all 35 of them, when they felt that sad thing, they put their hands down. And when they all had their hands down, I said, okay, hold on to that thing that makes you feel sad. Keep your nose exactly where it is. Now bring your eyes straight up and look at the ceiling while maintaining those thoughts about the thing that makes you feel bad. And they all slowly began to smile because they were unable to feel those negative feelings while they had their eyes up.
Oh, but Hugh, someone told me just a week ago that eye accessing cues have been completely disproven and none of it exists. But the funny thing is, it's just a model and it's an extremely useful one. And we're talking about a typically aligned right-handed person with the cues that Hugh has said. But yes, if the person is looking up, why do you think Tony Robbins, when he would do the fire walk, if you look at the photographs, everybody who's walking those brief few steps across the hot coals has their eyes up as high as possible, switching them, A, from looking at the coals, and B, out of the kinesthetic or feeling system and into a visual system.
Right. I mean, think, this model of left is, I can't remember what you just said there, but I always get confused between my left and the person I'm looking at's left. But one direction is so-called visual recall up into whichever direction it is, and the other direction, right from left, is construction. And it's a model that we can generalize for the regular right-handed person, but it isn't going to necessarily apply to everybody who's right-handed. Not everybody who's left-handed has the opposite orientation, but it's generally useful, isn't it?
No, it's absolutely useful, and that's a brilliant point. So my trainers, Robert Dilts and Judy Delosier, they actually originated the model. They were sitting there having a conversation one day, and Judy looked up and away in a direction, and Robert said, "Hey, Judy, where did you go right now?" She said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you looked away. She said, I kind of went inside my head. And he said, oh, okay. And as they continued the conversation, he started to notice that there was an analogous connection between where her eyes went and what system she was accessing. Now, if NLP comes from modeling, what it really means is, if I'm sitting with Chris, I'm going to look at Chris and I'm going to talk to him. I'm going to notice where his eyes go and ask questions to notice if he's going to visual or auditory or kinesthetic. I'm going to rebuild the model for Chris. I'm going to rebuild the model for Mike. I'm going to rebuild the model for anyone. The general model is applicable, but I will adapt it to whoever I'm in front of because NLP is essentially for the person sitting in front of you.
Yes, and again, it's not one size fits all. We are back to dealing with people as individuals, which is what I very much like about it. And you mentioned some really foundational stuff here, Hugh, with the eye accessing cues and the meta model for using language to clarify language and modeling, determining what made great therapists great, and so on. But NLP then went through a number of transitions. When John Grinder created new code, he brought in a lot of body motion as well, which is brilliant because no longer was he, going into the past, dipping down a big dipper to get a resource state, bring into the present with all the junk that's attached to the dipper, the metaphorical dipper. But now he was talking in terms of creating high performance states and grafting them in the context they were needed. So new code involves a lot of body motion, especially in a lot of the interventions like Dock of the Bay and so on, and characterological adjectives, which may be a mystery to some of you, but they're worth pursuing. But the question is, where did NLP go? What was the third incarnation of it? Because I know that's where we are now pretty well.
Yep. What's interesting is a couple of weeks ago I actually had lunch with Michael Colgrass, who was one of the models, the musician,
Yep.
the conductor, who was John's Grinder for the John's Grinder. John Grinder's.
Can edit that out.
Yeah.
No, we can't. John's model for the demon state.
Okay.
The demon state of creativity came from Michael Colgrass, and so what basically the story I tell is that classical NLP was really, really good to use on someone else, and nobody could really use it very effectively on themselves. And this, as the story goes, Grinder and Delosier kind of went back and they watched all these people doing amazing interventions using NLP, and they were wrecks themselves. Their personal lives were not very good. And so Grinder and Delosier said, you know what, we left something on the cutting room floor. We really needed to take some stuff that never made it to the NLP model and put it back, like perceptual positions. Very, very critical, the notion of having multiple views of seeing one situation that didn't really quite make it to the original model. Now, subsequent to that, the newest model of NLP is, Robert Dilts calls it third generation NLP or systemic NLP. The notion is that we're taking the idea of systems theory, so we're taking Virginia Satir's systemic view of the family, and now we're layering that back onto the model of NLP. We're using a lot of movement, a lot of spatial anchoring. We're using neurological levels. We're using a lot of timelines as well, but it's all integrated into very tightly framed, we can call them patterns or processes or interventions. But the inherent wisdom in them is so tightly bound. In my classes, I actually teach high-end interventions on day 2, and then we unpack them for 4 days. So people are learning really high-quality NLP immediately, but they don't really know what the hell they're doing until 3 weeks later.
Now, this is a crucial point because you've opened so many boxes with this, Hugh, that we really need to pursue. One of them is you're talking about your teachers. I know you studied with Dilts and some of the best in the world, and that's what it took to become an NLP trainer. You went through practitioner level, master practitioner sometime later, and then a trainer's course where you became a trainer. In my own case, I did practitioner in Bandler's system. I did master practitioner with John Grinder's system, and then I did the trainer's course with Derek Baumer, one of my mentors, and that was a 2-year course to become an NLP trainer. Now, what I find appalling is now people are being certified as NLP trainers by people who have no NLP certification whatsoever. So if you look at it in terms of practitioner going upward, master practitioner, trainer, then there would be a trainer's trainer who can certify trainers, but you have people who are not even practitioners who are certifying trainers, and that kind of training is essentially meaningless.
You know what? I have no idea how they bring that off. Really, it's appalling to me that in the world of NLP you have a trainer training, an air quotes trainer who has not properly been trained themselves even as a practitioner or master practitioner, and what are they doing out there? I mean, it hurts. I run the most complete NLP training in Canada. My training is 18 days long. There is nobody in Canada that even comes close. I don't know of anybody in the U.S. except for Robert Dilts himself, and he does it once a year in Santa Cruz, and it costs about $9,000.
Whoa.
So it's some expensive stuff. And then you get somebody, all of these people who shall go unnamed, at least in this area, who do 5 days, 6 days, 9 days of training, and some of them charge like $5,000-$6,000. And what are they doing, honestly, between you and me and all of our listeners, is they're creating a business model for themselves because they train somebody as a practitioner, then they push them into the master practitioner, then they push them into the trainer training, and then they get them to train for themselves. And I've had people, Mike, you've been in this business for a long time, so here's what I get. I get people coming to me after taking all of the streams from somebody else, coming to me kind of quietly and whispering, I kind of don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me out?
Yeah, and they want to come and study with you to fix the holes in their learning, which will be considerable. And I'm seeing the exact same thing, as Chris is well aware, in the world of hypnosis.
Oh, yes.
Insofar as we have so many people come and study and take my 5-day architecture of hypnosis who have been trained, so-called, by other people and are really, really poor hypnotists. I mean, the number of hypnosis trainers we have trained is pretty amazing. It's the same thing. We have the inept teaching the ludicrous to the ignorant. I mean, it's a very, very sad situation. And I think people out there listening, if you want to study Neuro Linguistic Programming, you make sure you are going to someone who has credentials. Find out who trained them and what they had to go through in order to be a trainer. Ask to see their trainer's certificate. If they don't have one, or if it's got their own name on it, there's something wrong.
I had somebody come to me a couple of weeks ago. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. And they said, hey, I really want to have a job as an NLP trainer. And I said, okay, cool. So what you're training? Oh, I took this online course and I became a practitioner on like a week in June. And then 2 weeks later, I became a master practitioner. And then 3 weeks after that, I became a trainer. Hey, can you hire me? And I don't even know what to say to them because they paid good money.
I think no would be a good start.
Well, I do that gently. But they really, these are nice people. They're earnest people. Remember, they're not wrong.
We're not taking a shot at people, how nice they are. I mean, all kinds of people are nice. I'm sure Dexter's nice to his friends. But the reality is, it's not a matter of how nice someone is. That's a complete red herring. The question is, are they trained? No. Are they able to replicate these things?
They're lovely people who've actually been swindled. And that's my challenge with them. So when I say they're nice people, it's really because I very carefully go about telling them in the nicest way possible that you've done 15 hours of online training and versus 18 days. So who's the airline pilot you want flying your plane? Who's the guy you want taking out your gallbladder? And so I gently approach it. They're lovely people who've been really badly taken care of.
And one can study online, but unless they are interacting with real human beings and conditioning the patterns in, it's really not going to make much difference, is it?
No, because you know what? The world is visual, it's auditory, but at the end of the day, it's kinesthetic. And as I learned really powerfully a long time ago, knowledge is only rumor until it's in the muscle. And when knowledge is in the muscle, then you can replicate it, you can duplicate it, because then you own it. But until then, it's all just a big mystery.
And kinesthetic, of course, is the feeling system for all you NLP trainers out there. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, let's
hear from Dexter.
I want to hear, thanks. I think that's bringing back memories from podcast 16 or something like that. I wanted to ask you this. So in Mike Mandel's model of teaching hypnosis, he teaches a stripped-down neo-Ericksonian process. It's not rocket science. You have to learn a few important principles of how to do hypnosis, and then you can find out that if you learn from someone as skilled as this guy here, you are going to be damn good at hypnosis in a very short period of time. NLP is not quite that simple. There's a lot more to it, right? But are we still talking about teaching some basic tools and then just mastering those tools, or is it a very complex big toolbox that is going to scare a lot of people away?
That's funny. I love it. There are people out there in the world called NLP Geeks who you might recognize because you have no idea what the hell they're talking about, because all they're doing is talking about lost performatives and all sorts of arcane...
They're the ones that make NLP sound weird, right?
Missing referential indices.
Yes. And so what I tend to do is, my job is to demystify NLP, to turn it into English. And you know what, Chris? It's not complicated. That's the funny thing. And that's why I think that there's a significant analogous connection between Mendelian hypnosis, shall we name it?
Sure.
And our model of NLP, because it's not difficult. It's not tricky. It's not a big, scary, opaque thing that you have to deconstruct. It can be taught really effectively, really quickly, really easily.
And really systematically.
Yes.
And you're not going to learn it in one day, but it is not rocket science, folks.
Right. And we're back to the whole thing again of principles. Now, Chris is a really good self-defense teacher. I know because I trained him. And he's one of the black belts I trained. And he's very, very good at taking people from large chunks, which is big overriding principles, and then breaking it down into smaller and smaller chunks until they can replicate excellence. And the way we do hypnosis is the same. We're teaching principles, not millions and millions of details or thousands of language patterns that you got to memorize and drill into your system. We teach you principles, and we teach you self-defense principles the same way. So it doesn't matter if somebody grabs you in some totally new way or comes at you with, a lead pipe instead of a broom. It doesn't matter, because you have principles that you can apply automatically in the situation. When someone has the skill level in Neuro Linguistic Programming, as Hugh does, he is running a lot of this stuff unconsciously at this point. He's running principles. He's not even thinking, I'm sure you're not thinking, this needs to be a 6-step reframe here. No, you're just doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, and you go with your gut, right? And you build rapport first, and then you work with the client second based on skills
rapport
that you know.
is an NLP term for those NLP trainers out there.
all three of you. No, all 40 of you. So what's underneath all of this is that what we're doing is we're conferring a skill and a wisdom, and then what people do is, I don't provide. How many times have people asked you for a script? And I say, no.
Hundreds.
No scripts, because scripts give you the ability to read. What we do is we confer the ability for somebody to have the skill level so that they can make it up as they go along. But there's a lovely Gregory Bateson line that after mastery comes artistry, but not before.
That's nice. And Bateson, I know, was one of Derek Balmer, my mentors. He got so much of his stuff from Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist. Very interesting stuff. I think Hugh and Chris knows this example. I'll just give you a quick headline. I worked with a dentist in Toronto with a number of his patients. I worked with Dr. Bill Kerr for some time, and he put all these 6 lovely veneers on my teeth so I no longer look like Austin Powers. And the interesting thing about it was I worked with a kid with him who had out-of-control gagging years ago. They put the dental mirror in his mouth, he'd throw up on his shirt. And the way it was fixed was actually using a Robert Dilts allergy cure, which I adapted and had the kids see another kid called Paul wearing the same Maple Leafs jersey across the room, put a barrier across transparent. We watched his favorite hockey player, Dave Gilmore, go and whisper to the other Paul how he could, not gag no matter what was put in his mouth, and then integrate the learnings. The kid face flushes, integration, never gags again. Now that's an allergy cure, but it's that same thing. It's the flexibility of recognizing patterns and when we can apply them.
That's awesome. I love that story, and I'm going to borrow it. When I first became an NLP practitioner in 1993, for you kids, that's a long time ago. In 1993, I finished my practitioner training. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I had a friend who was a 350-pound bike courier, and he couldn't ride his bike up a hill in Montreal. I worked with him for 4 minutes and said anything else. And he goes, well, I have this guilt about overeating. And I said, sure, I can help you. And I made it all up based on the foundational elements that I'd been taught and that I'd mastered. I cannot tell you what process that I did because it was not a process as much as it was organically created in the moment, tailored to my friend. Here's the joke. He lost 100 pounds in 6 months, and he rode up the hill for the next 5 days. Before he even remembered that we did any work on it, he called me up and he said, hey, I rode my bike up that hill every time, and I couldn't do it before.
Brilliant. And that's an example of one example of what we call the apex problem. You can remove a problem so thoroughly the person might not even notice it's gone. Like the number of people, take away an elevator phobia, and they ride an elevator about 5 times before they realize they haven't been in one for 30 years, and now they're suddenly in them again. Amazing.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So I think we're probably getting to the end of this. Is there anything else that we want to say about NLP before
Chris,
we
there is.
close?
I just want to drum this in. The reason we have Hugh on the program is the only NLP organization that we are linked to is his organization, NLP Works, out of Toronto, Canada. And if you want to get some world-class NLP training, come and study with Hugh. Google NLP Works. Look at his stuff online. Nobody has his credentials. Nobody has his skill levels. I watched him working today on a video as he and Chris were recording some stuff, and I just marvel at the man's skill. So you must, if you want to up your NLP skills, if you're an NLP trainer and you'd like to reach practitioner level, come and study with Hugh, and he will get you there.
NLPworks.com, and NLP Works is his YouTube channel as well. Also, I understand that in January, Mike, you're doing a 2-day introduction to Ericksonian hypnosis.
Yes, I am, Chris.
January 12th and 13th, and you're doing that with Hugh at NLP Works at his studio in Toronto.
Our second one.
Downtown Toronto.
So that's fantastic. So people can head on over to NLPworks.com and find out more about that 2-day Ericksonian hypnosis introductory course. And if you're so inclined to take it to the next level, you can join us April 13th, 14th, and then 19th, 20th, and 21st. So it's 2 weekends plus a Friday where Mike Mandel is going to teach you the full 5-day Architecture of Hypnosis certification. And last but not least...
Yes, in February, Mindscaping.
Mindscaping is best described as something awesomely done in trance to help people, very NLP-like methodology to fix people's problems.
Well, it has a number of applications. We'll edit that out. It has a number of applications, but Mindscaping was a discovery I made a number of years ago, or months ago. We've run it by all kinds of therapists. They're having a ball with it. Erickson's work was brilliant because if he had a young ball player in front of him who had, problems with his shoulder that were psychogenic, whatever, Erickson would know to tell him a metaphor about playing baseball that would perfectly fit the situation and fix it. Mindscaping gets rid of the hit or miss. Because the problem with that is you have to craft a metaphor that in the amygdala of the brain, amygdala as one trainer says, wrong, in the amygdala, part of the human brain, which I'm equipped with, the brain will code certain aspects of patterns, will look for pattern recognition. Now it will find a pattern within a metaphor and apply it to the situation. So Erickson was really adroit at doing this. If you are good at this, it's fantastic, but sometimes you might not get an accurate metaphor that will match the pattern the person needs. What Mindscaping does is completely eliminate the need to guess because it causes the other person's unconscious mind to generate the metaphor for you that works 100% of the time. We have yet to see it fail. It'll work on immune system support, getting over fears and anxieties, people in stuck states, chronic grief, moving forward, building your business, pretty well anything you want to apply it to. It can be done in a few minutes or a full hour deep session. So we're doing the first ever Mindscaping certification course in Toronto, Canada, the very ilium,
Nucleus.
World Hypnosis. And right at the University of Toronto, it's a 2-day course, a certification course. We'll be teaching Mindscaping Level 1. Later, we'll be doing Level 2, and then I'll be opening it up to a trainer program so people will be trained to do it right.
February 9th and 10th here in Toronto. So, Mike, why don't we bring it off with a metaphor?
Well, I think we've all three of us hit the nail on the head today, haven't we? Ding, ding, ding,
Yes.
ding, ding. So here's the metaphor for today. And this came out of my 1992-93 NLP training. Many, many years ago in a land far away, there was a beautiful town. And in this beautiful town, there was a shop owned by a master clockmaker. And he sold every sort of clock imaginable. Now, I realize there are anachronisms in the story that couldn't possibly fit, but it's a story. He sold grandfather clocks and wristwatches and pocket watches and cuckoo clocks, but he also repaired them, which is where he did most of his thriving business. And people would bring their ailing clocks and watches to him, and the master clockmaker would fix them all, and cuckoos would cuckoo again, and watches would wind again, and crystals that were broken were repaired, and so on. And grandfather clocks would chime. Well, a young upstart clockmaker was passing through the town, and he saw this shop and the thriving business the master clockmaker was doing and thought, I too can do this. And so a block away he set up his own business and began selling and repairing clocks and watches. And because he worked at a discounted rate, shall we say, he had many, many customers who brought ailing pocket watches and clocks and wristwatches and cuckoo clocks and grandfather clocks and mantelpiece clocks and so on. And he repaired them all. And they would leave through the back door, very happy and pleased with the small amount of money they paid for such an amazing reward. Well, as time goes on and as stories change, eventually a wizard came to town, as often happens with these stories. And the wizard went into the young clockmaker, clock repairman's shop, and he said, what do you do, my son? And he explained that he had this wonderful job fixing watches and clocks, and everyone loved him. And the wizard said, let me show you something, my son. Took him out through the back door into the alley in the courtyard, and standing around, looking befuddled, were dozens of people holding watches that didn't run with broken springs and cracked crystals and clocks that would not chime and grandfather clocks where the pendulums did not swing and cuckoo clocks that didn't chirp and cuckoo. And he said, what's happened? And he said, you do not have the skills to really fix these things. You just got them running again, but they've gone back the way they were. And he said, what should I do? And the wizard said, go and apprentice with the master clockmaker, and he will tell you when you are ready to open your own business.
And so thanks to everyone for listening to Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. This has been session number 28. I'm Chris Thompson, and with us has been the amazing Hugh Comferford of NLPWorks.com. Make sure to head on over to the website, MikeMandelHypnosis.com. Use MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class to get information on our next live training. And head on over to iTunes and leave a rating for the show. The more ratings we get, the more people we can expose this show to, and everyone can enjoy and learn. With that, we'll see you all on the next show. Scare you? Think you were in a jungle?